The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another quick chat here with Michael Coleman. He's the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank, HAFB.org, and he does a wonderful job talking about all the needs and things that go on with food banking, including Feeding America right here in Alabama. They do wonderful work. Last week we focused on stigmas. We still have a ways to go here. And right off the bat, I want to jump into inadequacy of assistance. Please explain what that means.
Yeah, there's some people, when you get into the poverty issues, and people are delving into the root causes. And so when they look at food banking, they look at food banking as being inadequate because it doesn't address the root causes. There was a book that was written years ago that was called When Helping Hurts. And there's a little diagram in there that basically talks about there's emergency care, and then there's developmental care. And I have been in both those spaces. But one of the things I've learned is you do want to develop people out of and give them, whether it's workforce development or counts, whatever they need to come out of poverty and overcome those barriers. But the truth of the matter is you can't do that until you address emergency need. Now, what we tend to do is only address emergency need. And so people don't come out of that. Mm-hmm. It establishes a cycle. So I'm for both approaches. But you can't get into the development. You can't get people to do differently when they're hungry and they can't feed themselves. And so lots of times people are like, well, I'm just not crazy about this approach. I just feel like you're not really addressing, you're addressing that in the moment. But as long as you understand it for what it is, yes, I do have to address that. And there's lots of people that aren't in generational poverty. There are people who are in situational poverty. And so it could be, I just lost my job. I've worked my whole life. I've lost my job. I've been out of work for 3 months, or I'm having a health issue. Hey, and I can't make ends meet. Right now, we're working with a health equity issue with our hospitals because our hospitals, our dietitians are coming into the hospitals. They have cancer, or they're being treated for cancer or heart issues. And they're saying, hey, you need to eat right, you need to have a certain amount of produce, all the things, all the dietary, but they're sending them home to empty houses.
Yeah.
And it could be because they've been out of work for a while. It could be they're going through. So the bottom line is when people are in those emergency situations, you ask yourself, well, who in society bears that responsibility to step up and care for our neighbors? And that's what local food banks do. And that's what we're trying to do, is to say, hey, there's a million different scenarios as to where people come up and they just don't make ends meet, or they just can't fill that gap themselves. And I'm all for dealing with dealing with the development side. But the bottom line is you got to deal with emergency need up front.
In a situational poverty situation, what is the average length of time that a family or an individual uses the services of a food bank? Do you know that time?
It's not unheard of at all for somebody to come one time.
Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah. Come one time and get it, or might go through a period of time, 1 to 2 months. But there's lots of stories out there of where somebody goes 1 to 2 months, because just real quick, not to go too deep into it, but with situational poverty, you think, okay, your life is your typical lower middle class, whatever, but you're able to provide for yourself. You're self-sufficient. And then something happens. You get divorced, you lose a job, there's illness, whatever it is. And now you can't do that. And so for that time, you're going to kind of be in a gap and you need some help. And it's great if you've got a family to do that. It's great if you have a church to do that. But there's some people that don't have that support system. And so who do they turn to? They may not have the resources to go get a loan. They don't have family to turn to. And that's where nonprofits fill in that gap and say, "Hey, well, look, we're not going to let you and your children go hungry.
You're watching,
after that for however you need until you can transition out."
You're watching Bite by Bite. Heart of Alabama Food Bank CEO Michael Coleman joins us every single week, and I absolutely love this next stigmatism. I don't like stigmatisms as a whole, but I think it's really interesting because I think most people wonder, where is this food coming from, and is it just food that no one else wants, and what happens to the waste? What's some of the stigmatism that go along with that?
Yeah, and some of it's a little hard to follow sometimes. They feel like, well, we contribute to the waste. And that logic is a little bit hard to figure out, because in reality, across the Feeding America network, we save 4.7 billion pounds of food from unnecessarily going into landfills a year. It is. And it shows you how much food that we are in a waste society. I mean, look, I'm no different. I eat what I want. I throw away what we don't have. I think every family is guilty of that at times. And because we're used to having plenty. And if I throw that out, there'll always be more. But we are very focused on not only salvaging food, but bringing in food to our network and adding to that. So let me give you a good example of waste and something we're going through right now. So there's a local chicken plant. I won't mention the company's name. Good company, great supporters of the Feeding America. They do rotisserie chickens, and they do 1.4 million pounds a week of rotisserie chickens.
Wow.
And this is one little plant in a small town in Alabama. And there's how much chicken's out there is just amazing. But they process it, and they do rotisserie chickens for Walmart and Publix and all that. Well, if something happens to that chicken, if it's not perfect or whatever, they end up kind of parting out or just and then they're like, okay, we want to give this to food banks or whatever. But if a food bank can't take it, they end up throwing it away. And there's a lot of food, good food, fresh food that's being thrown away. We're working to capture all that and to pull that into the system. But that's a great example, because they would rather donate it than throw it away, because when you donate it, they get the tax write-off of the company. But it's adding, we get to take it and then redistribute it out to those in need. So we are working hard to salvage as much as we can to eliminate waste, and which kind of then rolls into our next one, which is, you're saving food and not throwing it away, but you're giving away expired food. And that was always my view of the food bank many, many years ago. It's something so important. If people could understand, we have such food safety regulations that we follow. They're so strict. We have our workers are food safety certified. And I can't remember if we've touched on this, but it's worth touching on again, is people simply do not understand the difference between best if used by date. They simply say that's an expiration date versus, and so the best if used by date is saying, if you use it by this date, basically the manufacturer is guaranteeing it's going to be the same color, consistency, quality, all of that. But the USDA has guidelines, and a can of green beans, for instance, is actually still safe and good for 18 months past the best if used by date. You're not giving people bad food or unsafe food. Now, 18 months goes by, maybe they're not as green as they were, but it has nothing to do with food safety. And so we're capturing all of that stores say, well, we can't sell past the best purchase. I mean, but that's not anywhere close to the majority of our food. We do collect some of those, absolutely. So we do have some past the date. But we also get donations, and we also purchase truckloads of food that go out there with a 2-year shelf life still on them. They're nowhere near the best if used by date.
Can you expound a little bit on the idea, too, that bad, and I mean nutritionally bad food, is cheaper than healthy food? I think a lot of people think that if you want to go on a diet, it's going to be super expensive, and it's just not true.
Yeah, so I get a little bit of both sides of that. And I do feel a responsibility, because I understand working with people in poverty for so long, typically people in poverty do not know how to read food labels, or they don't make decisions based on the food labels. That's typically a middle class expectation, because we say, oh, this is too high in fats, or this is too high in calories, or whatever. And you typically, back when I used to work with people in poverty every single day, they simply illustrated they didn't know how to read a food label. And so what we have right now is we have an abundance from the grocery stores and stuff of their bakery items. And so I told the CEO of Publix, who, by the way, huge fan of Publix. They are so generous to us and so good to us. They had a hunger summit, and I said, you produce more bread, and everybody has excess. Walmart, everybody has excess. And I said, why is there so much? I genuinely didn't know. It was not I hope it didn't come across as accusatory. I genuinely didn't know. And they said, because it cost us almost the same to make 20 loaves as it does, 40 loaves as it does 20 loaves. And so bread, but the markup in bread and bakery is so high because they know there's going to be some throwaway that they don't ever want to get caught short. So they continue to make excess bread and cakes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but when I get it, I'm giving it to a community. Our poverty community in the Montgomery area is obese, not healthy, battling diabetes, Now, I don't want to deprive a family of having a cake that's donated and enjoying sweets. I feel the same way. But if you overwhelm them with sweets and things like that, and they don't understand nutritional standards, they're not going to make good choices. So I'm not trying to be a parent to them or a helicopter to them or whatever. It's just, you're giving something to a community that you want to limit. And then the rest we do have to throw away. Or what we try to do is we try to donate that to be more even eco-friendly and stretching all this out. Is we try to donate our stuff to farmers, especially the hog farmers and stuff like that. So it doesn't go into landfills. All the excess goes to animal byproducts or animal feed and stuff like that, which is, you want to use every single thing you can.
Michael, last night my daughter cleaned out my refrigerator and she found a pound of salami, and she was going to throw it away. And I said, don't throw that away. What's the expiration date? She said August 22nd. I said, well, that's just a couple weeks old. I had me the most wonderful salami sandwich. And then I realized it was August of 22, not August 22nd. It was a year old, but it was still delicious. I love salami. Listen, I want to get into the food banks perpetuate dependency of others, but I want to say that for our next Bite by Bite, because I think we can get an entire podcast out of that, and I think that's a huge stigmatism. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to you next week.
I enjoyed it.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curre Radio.